You people think you own the court. The shout ripped across the marble steps, loud enough to stop conversations mid-sentence. The late morning sun glared off the courthouse columns, casting long shadows that stretched toward the black sedan idling at the curb. Judge Evelyn Carter sat in the driver's seat, still in her judicial robe from that morning's sentencing, a symbol of law now treated like a costume. She didn't flinch. Her hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, but her eyes tracked every movement of the three uniformed officers closing in from opposite sides. From the back seat came a sound that drew glances from the small crowd forming nearby, a low, sustained growl, like rolling thunder under the floorboards. Kaiser and Valkyrie, her retired military K-9 partners, stood tense, hackles high, eyes locked on the men outside. The leather of their harnesses creaked as they shifted forward, muscles taut, reading the threat. One officer stepped so close that his breath fogged her window. He tapped the glass with his flashlight, once, twice, a dull percussion that matched the pounding in her temples. "Step out, now," he ordered. The command was casual, but the edge in his tone was sharp enough to cut skin. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. She could see courthouse staff pausing at the entrance, watching, whispering, holding up phones. Another tap on the window. A heavier footstep. And then, cutting through the tension from across the street, a familiar voice called her name, calm, steady, and carrying the weight of someone who wasn't going to ask twice. The officers had boxed her in less than 20 yards from the courthouse steps, their cruiser angled across her path like a barricade. Red and blue lights spun silently, painting her windshield in pulses of color that made every blink feel like a warning. Evelyn kept her voice even, her words precise. "You've stopped a sitting judge in front of her own courthouse. Explain the probable cause." The tallest officer smirked, leaning down until his eyes were level with hers. "Judge? That's cute. Where's the ID? Oh wait, you think that robe is enough?" His gaze swept over the black fabric with the slow, dismissive once-over of someone appraising a knockoff bag. Behind him, a second officer peeled off toward the rear of her sedan, his hand reaching for the back door handle. Kaiser's growl deepened instantly, a vibration that seemed to travel through the car's frame. The man's fingers hesitated an inch from the handle. "Control your animals," the first officer barked, but there was a hitch in his tone now. Evelyn's right hand drifted, not toward the door latch but to the console where a small radio was clipped. The breeze carried the courthouse flag snap overhead, a sharp sound that made her think of gavels striking wood. She felt the eyes of every person gathering at the top of the stairs, law clerks, defendants, tourists, watching to see if the robed black woman in the car would be forced out like a trespasser. Then came the sound of running footsteps, quick and sure, cutting across the plaza. Evelyn's eyes shifted to the side mirror just as a shadow closed in on the officers. She knew that stride. "Step away from my mother's car." Marcus Ellington's voice cut clean through the chatter as he came in from the crosswalk, tall, broad-shouldered, moving like he'd measured the distance and the risk in the same breath. The nearest officer pivoted, squaring up. "And you are?" Marcus stopped at the front fender, palms open, stance rooted. "Former K-9 handler, federal detail. Those dogs know my heartbeat." Kaiser surged forward until the harness strap tightened across his chest, a low thunder rolling out of him. Valkyrie mirrored the angle from the other side, shoulders stacked, ears forward. The youngest cop flinched and his hand brushed the holster. "Bad idea," Marcus said, eyes never leaving the gun. "They're trained to create space when a weapon clears leather." "Control your mutts," the tall officer snapped, but his gaze darted to the gathering crowd. Phones were up now, clerks, tourists, a defendant in yesterday's suit, lenses blinking like a field of watchful eyes. Evelyn leaned a fraction closer to the glass. "Officer, you are escalating a stop with no stated cause. State it now or back away from my vehicle." The tall one smirked. "You people love big words. Here's one, compliance." He reached for the door handle. Marcus shifted, placing his body between the grasping hand and the seam of the driver's door. "Here's another," he said evenly. "Liability." He angled his head toward the plate camera on the cruiser and then to the security dome mounted on the courthouse cornice. Multiple angles. Multiple witnesses. One career. For a beat, no one moved. Then the youngest officer's thumb found the holster snap with a nervous click. Kaiser's growl compressed into silence that felt like a held breath. "Holster," Marcus said, voice dropping. "I won't repeat it." Evelyn's eyes tracked the man's trembling hand. She could taste metal at the back of her tongue, the body's way of telling her that fight and memory often arrive together. A woman from the steps called out, "That's Judge Carter." Another voice answered, "Leave her alone." The mood tilted. The tall officer stiffened, jaw bunching. "Back up," he barked to the onlookers, but it sounded less like command and more like plea. Marcus tapped the glass twice with two knuckles, small and precise. "Mom, breathe. I've got the outside. They don't know what these dogs are capable of, but I do." "Open this door," the tall one said, bluff cracking. "Now." "No," Evelyn replied, steady as a level. "You may address me by my title or you may call your supervisor." "Big talk from behind glass," the young one muttered. "Big mistake from behind a badge," Marcus answered. "Last time, holster." The young officer's hand froze. The crowd edged another step closer. Somewhere, a siren wailed and then faded, as if the city itself were deciding which side to take. A new voice cut the plaza like a gavel strike. "What is this?" A police lieutenant strode in, sleeves rolled, tie yanked loose, eyes taking inventory in a heartbeat, the robe, the dogs, the drawn crowd, the clenched jaw of his own men. "Judge Carter," he said, recognition landing heavy. "Ma'am." Evelyn lowered her window 3 inches, enough for respect to pass through but not threat. "Lieutenant, your officers stopped me without cause," attempted entry, and one reached for his weapon. Her words were clipped, each one placed like a law book on a shelf. The lieutenant turned, voice flat as concrete. "Badge and gun." "All 3. "Sir, we had badge and gun." Metal clicked. Holsters unbuckled. The sound of surrender hit the pavement with 3 muted thuds. The tall officer's face flushed a blotchy red. "She was resisting," he protested weakly. "Resisting what?" the lieutenant asked. "Driving away from her own courthouse." He scanned the crowd. "Anyone filming?" A forest of phones lifted higher. He nodded once, decision set. "You're relieved pending review. Move to the curb and wait." Marcus stepped back half a pace and opened the rear door. Kaiser and Valkyrie flowed out like poured shadow, stopping in a perfect heel between him and the sedan, heads level, eyes locked, not a hair out of place. A hush fell over the steps. Even the flag above seemed to stall between gusts. "Sir," Evelyn said to the lieutenant, "an apology is owed, not to me, but to the court." He swallowed, then squared himself toward the open window. "On behalf of this department, ma'am, I apologize to the court of Fulton County and to you personally." He shifted to his men. "You forgot where you were. You forgot who we serve." The young officer stared at the dogs, throat working, bravado leaking away. "We got a call, a black woman matching a description," his voice thinned. Evelyn's reply was surgical. "Descriptions built on skin are not probable cause." She lifted a hand from the wheel, fingers steady. "Lieutenant, I will expect your incident report before close of business." Name spelled correctly. A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the crowd and then died. Marcus gave a tiny whistle and the dogs pivoted in unison, resetting at the passenger side. The choreography said more than a speech ever could. The lieutenant noticed, and something like shame crossed his face, quick and human. "Ma'am," he said, softer, "are you safe to depart?" I am now, Evelyn answered. But safety should not depend on an audience. Traffic opened like a curtain as the black sedan pulled from the curb. Marcus settled into the passenger seat, one hand resting on his knee, the other hovering near the center console out of habit. Kaiser and Valkyrie curled in the back, heads still up, ears checking every sound that followed them down the block. For a block they drove in measured quiet, the courthouse shrinking in the mirror to a set of white pillars and a scatter of uniforms. You want me to call the presiding judge? Marcus asked. Evelyn shook her head. Paper first. Paper lasts longer than outrage. She exhaled once, long and even, then adjusted the collar of her robe. Today wasn't about me. It was a test the plaza had to see graded. Marcus watched the passing storefronts, the barber who always waved, the church sign flicking digital verses, the bakery already selling out of morning bread. They'll talk about those dogs, he said. They'll remember the robe, she replied. And the question. What question? When a black robe in front of a courthouse isn't enough, what is? A crosswalk flashed red. Evelyn eased to a stop. On the corner, a kid on a scooter stared at the car, then at the dogs, then at her face. He didn't raise a phone. He just looked. She lowered her window another inch. You headed to school? Yes, ma'am, he said, eyes wide. Learn the rules, she told him gently, so nobody can fake them in front of you. The kid nodded like he'd been handed a secret and pushed off when the light changed. They rolled past the park where jurors sometimes ate lunch. The morning breeze carried the smell of cut grass. Marcus drummed once on his thigh. You know, there's a reason handlers teach dogs to hold until released. Evelyn glanced over. So that strength waits for wisdom. Exactly. She turned on to Peachtree, the city opening ahead in glass and sky. In the mirror, the courthouse was gone, but the image remained, 3 men stalled by a robe, 2 dogs holding a line, a crowd deciding what it would accept next time. Evelyn set her jaw the way she did before pronouncing a sentence. We don't shout lessons, she said. We leave them standing. The sedan merged into traffic. Behind them, the plaza filled with ordinary noise again, but a small space where the cruiser had blocked her path stayed oddly clear, as if the morning had drawn a chalk outline around a boundary that would not be crossed again. Real justice isn't loud, it's deliberate, unshakable, and leaves a mark long after the moment passes. Judge Carter's restraint showed that the law is most powerful when paired with wisdom, not fury. Her stand reminds us that silence, when chosen with purpose, can be louder than any shout. If stories like this resonate with you, subscribe, share your thoughts, and tell us when you've had to stand your ground.